breaking Camron in cuffs, Jim Jones in a hospital gown, and Dipset hanging on by a thread. What in the Bet Hip Hop Awards just happened? That's right, two of Harlem's most infamous icons just turned a backstage moment into an alt-street brawl. And baby, it wasn't for show. Camron allegedly put hands on Jim like he was still battling for the throne. And now one's behind bars while the other's hooked up to IVs and fielding questions about broken ribs. Are we witnessing the violent collapse of Dipset live and unfiltered? Or is this just another toxic chapter in their never-ending power struggle? And let's not play innocent here. This wasn't just about bruised egos and scuffed designer sneakers. Rumors say it started with money, turned into betrayal, and ended with blood on the floor. Cameras caught the chaos. Security called for backup. Fans screaming, industry insiders scrambling, and the internet in flames. But what really went down that night? Who threw the first punch? And is this fight the final nail in the Dipset dynasty? Buckle up, because what you're about to hear isn't just messy, it's historic. Welcome to the scandal that just body-slammed hip-hop's most notorious duo. Let's dive in. It was supposed to be just another glamorous night in the hip-hop world. Another elite event with velvet ropes, sparkling chains, and industry icons showing off their status. But instead, it's turned into the disaster that nobody saw coming, and everybody's still trying to process. Camron and Jim Jones, the so-called pillars of Dipset, ended up at the center of a backstage fight so explosive. It's left the entire music scene stunned and the streets buzzing with rumors. Accusations and leaked footage that looks more like a bar fight than a business meeting. These weren't just two rappers exchanging words. This was a full-blown furniture-flying, security-panicking meltdown that ended with Camron in handcuffs and Jim Jones being rushed to the hospital with visible injuries and a trail of chaos behind him. The question now isn't just what happened, but how it got this bad between two men who once called themselves brothers. People close to the situation are saying the tension has been building for months, and some even claim this all traces back to old beefs, money owed, deals gone sideways, and a whole lot of bruised ego. The cameras were rolling, and by the time security could even react, the damage had already been done. Let's be real, Cam and Jim have always had a love-hate relationship. But no one predicted fists flying backstage at one of the most high-profile industry events of the year. Witnesses say the energy was off from the jump. Camron walked in with that same Harlem swagger he's always had, but there was something cold in the air. Jim Jones was already backstage, talking business, surrounded by his usual crew. But, according to multiple sources, the minute Cam showed up, the mood shifted. They didn't greet each other. No head nods, no daps, not even eye contact. People who've seen these two in the same room before knew something was off. It wasn't. Long before quiet tension turned into raised voices. At first, people thought it was just banter to old friends arguing like they always do. But then the voices got louder, the body language got aggressive, and the vibe shifted from awkward to dangerous. One source said Camron got in Jim's face talking about loyalty and betrayal, and the next thing you know, drinks were flying and someone got shoved into a speaker rack. That's when security tried to step in, but it was already too late. What happened next was pure chaos. Cam allegedly threw the first punchies, a full swing in front of artists, managers, PR people. And cameras rolling nonstop. Jim didn't. Back down, he came back swinging, yelling something about never being anyone's puppet and not being silenced anymore. Chairs got knocked over, someone's chain flew across the floor, and before anyone could blink, the scene turned into an all-out brawl. Security scrambled to break it up. But these weren't two rookies fighting over clout. These were veterans with real history, real grudges, and apparently real hands. According to someone who caught it all on their phone, Cam was shouting that Jim had been moving shady behind his back, making deals without him, trying to replace him as the face of Dipset. And Jim, bleeding and furious, was yelling that he was tired of playing second fiddle while Cam sat on a throne built off the backs of everyone else's hustle. It wasn't just a fight, it was a public unraveling of a partnership that had been barely holding together for years. And while both men had security detail nearby, it took more than just muscle to pull them apart. By the time police arrived, it was too late to pretend it was just a misunderstanding. Camron was still fuming, being restrained by 2 guards, as he screamed about being betrayed. Jim Jones, now bruised and in pain, was being checked by medics, and reportedly refused to speak to anyone except his own team. Once the cops got control of the scene, Cam was placed under arrest and escorted out through the back alley, still yelling about how he made Dipset and he'd burn it all down before letting anyone steal his shine. Meanwhile, Jim was taken out, on a stretcher, clutching his side and spitting blood, with his team trying to keep the cameras back. What happened backstage didn't just end with sirens and stretchers. It launched a firestorm across the internet that made headlines within. The hour clips of the brawl hit social media before either man could issue a statement. One video showed Cam lunging at Jim. Another showed Jim trying to swing while being dragged back by 2 men. The crowd reaction was instant and brutal. Fans started picking sides. Conspiracy theories popped up everywhere. And old interviews were being resurfaced with timestamps pointing to years of subtle shade, missed handshakes, and coded threats. This wasn't just about one fight. This was a moment that exposed everything people had been whispering about for years. The Dipset empire, once the definition of Harlem unity and street power, was now a broken mess on full display. And let's not pretend this is the first sign of trouble. Cam and Jim have had friction for years. Remember the 2007 fallout when Cam went ghost and Jim started building his solo brand? Remember when Cam did that shady live stream talking about how Jim wasn't really built for leadership? Or when Jim sat down with that rival podcast and all but called Cam selfish without saying his name? The signs were always there. And now it's all come to a head in the ugliest way possible. With lawsuits looming, medical bills piling up, and a brotherhood shattered in front of the world. And just when people thought things couldn't get any worse, the rumors started to roll in from inside the industry. People whispering about how this fight didn't just happen out of nowhere. How Cam had been plotting to cut Jim out of future Dipset deals. How Jim had been meeting with Cam's former business partners behind closed doors. One unnamed source even said this fight was just the tip of the iceberg. That a massive power grab had been brewing for months, and everyone backstage that night saw the crash coming. They just didn't think it would happen so publicly, so violently, and with cameras rolling. And now the fallout is just beginning, because what happened backstage might just destroy everything they built. The aftermath didn't just shake up Dipset, sent shockwaves through the entire entertainment industry. Within hours of the brawl, whispers turned into headlines, and headlines turned into a frenzy. Everyone had something to say, from washed up rappers trying to stay relevant to anonymous insiders claiming they saw the whole thing go down. But what nobody expected were the leaks. Yes, leaked voice notes, messages, and screenshots started making the rounds like wildfire. Allegedly, someone close to Jim's camp released audio of a heated phone call just days before the incident, where Jim could be heard saying he was done playing second to a man who hasn't dropped heat in a decade. Another leak showed a screenshot of a message from Cam's manager talking about a new Dipset business deal, one that conveniently left Jim out entirely. Coincidence? Or calculated move? Either way, the internet took it and ran. Within hours, fake investigators, YouTube gossip analysts, and fans turned conspiracy theorists were tearing into every piece of the puzzle, building timelines, dissecting interviews, and connecting dots that probably shouldn't even be in the same notebook. But in the court of public opinion, perception is reality. And right now, the perception is that this wasn't a spontaneous brawl. It was a long brewing explosion wrapped in betrayal, greed, and wounded pride. And then came the exclusive reports. One media outlet claimed that Jim Jones had suffered a fractured rib and a mild concussion from the fight, while another stated that Camron was facing multiple charges including assault, disorderly conduct, and property damage. There was even a rumor that the venue was considering filing a civil lawsuit against both artists for the destruction caused during the fight, which allegedly included broken lights, shattered sound equipment, and thousands of dollars in lost production time. The photos from the crime scene looked like something out of a behind-the-scenes horror film. Bottles smashed, cords tangled, furniture flipped over, and what appeared to be bloodstains near the corner of the green room. Someone even zoomed in on a single Timberland boot lying on its side next to a shattered bottle of Ace of Spades and claimed it was symbolic of Harlem's fallen empire. The drama didn't stop at the crime scene, though. Cam's camp rushed to control the narrative, releasing a short, cold statement claiming he was acting in self-defense and was deeply disappointed in the way the event spiraled out of control. Meanwhile, Jim's team played the victim card, saying their client had been ambushed by someone he once considered family. Both sides dug in their heels and the blame game was in full swing. Fans were split straight down the middle, some defending Cam's no-nonsense Harlem energy, others saying Jim had been disrespected and sidelined for too long. Memes flooded social media. People were comparing the fight to the Source Awards in the 90s, calling it the Fall of Dipset Live Edition. One post even had side-by-side screenshots of Cam and Jim during their peak versus now captioned, "From legends to liabilities, savage, but also kinda true." And as the dust settled, more shady details started to trickle out. An unnamed former Dipset affiliate, allegedly someone who had worked on past projects with both men, came forward claiming that this beef had been brewing for over a year. According to him, Cam had been secretly negotiating a Netflix-style docuseries about the rise and fall of Dip Satan. Guess who wasn't included in the final credits? That's right, Jim. The source claimed Jim found out about it just weeks before the event and confronted Cam's team privately, only to be brushed off. If that's true, then this fight wasn't a meltdown, it was a message. Another source alleged that Cam had been quietly trying to dissolve old contracts that gave Jim back-end profits from older Dipset hits. So while fans were still bumping old classics like nothing happened, the artists behind the music were allegedly plotting behind the scenes to cut each other out of future money. And it's not just music money either. It's talk of real estate deals, clothing lines, and tech ventures that Cam had invested in without looping Jim in. It was clear this wasn't about music anymore. This was about business, power, and who really owned the Dipset legacy. And let's not forget the entourage drama. Cam's longtime friend and bodyguard allegedly exchanged words with one of Jim's people moments before the brawl started. According to multiple eyewitnesses, someone from Jim's camp was filming Cam from across the room, which sparked tension. Cam's bodyguard reportedly told them to back off, and when they didn't, that's when things began to escalate. There's even a rumor that Jim was mic'd up for a podcast taping that was supposed to happen later that night, and the mics might have picked up some of the early confrontation, which would explain how audio leaks hit the internet so fast. And just when you think it can't get more ridiculous, someone dropped a voice note claiming to be from a female artist who was backstage at the time. In the note, she says she saw Cam look Jim dead in the eye and say, "You always been jealous of me and I should have cut you off years ago." Whether that's true or not, who knows, but it spread like wildfire and had the internet in full meltdown. And in the middle of all this chaos, other rappers started chiming in. Some offered support, others threw shade. One veteran artist tweeted, "Y'all surprised? Harlem dude's been beefing in designer clothes since the 90s. Another wrote, "This ain't about music, it's about egos too big for one legacy." Even 50 Cent, never one to miss a good opportunity to troll, posted a screenshot of the fight footage with the caption, "And y'all thought Verzuz was wild." Meanwhile, former Dipset affiliates stayed silent, which only fueled more speculation. Why wasn't Joel Santana speaking out? Where was Freaky Zeke? Was this the final nail in the Dipset coffin, or just the beginning of a full-scale war? Behind the scenes, there were talks that record labels and sponsors were already pulling out of upcoming projects. One insider said a major brand had quietly canceled a joint endorsement deal with Cam and Jim that was supposed to launch this fall. Another whispered that an entire Dipset reunion tour was now on indefinite hold. Financially, this fight could end up costing both men millions. Not just in lost deals, but in legal fees, court battles, and possible payouts. And the worst part, neither side seems ready to apologize or back down. Cam's team is preparing to fight the charges, reportedly claiming that Jim was the aggressor and Cam was merely defending himself from what he perceived as a physical threat. On the flip side, Jim's people are looking into medical documentation, hoping to build a case. That paints him as the victim of a premeditated attack. Fans are losing faith, the industry is watching like it's reality TV, and the silence from those once close to Dipset is deafening. If there's one thing that's clear, it's that this wasn't just a random altercation. This was personal. Deeply personal. And as both men continue to point fingers and gather legal teams, the world is left wondering, how did it all fall apart this fast? It's fast. And just when you think this mess couldn't get any more twisted, the legal fallout begins to unravel like a bad reality show with no commercial breaks. Camron, freshly booked and processed, has been hit with a cocktail of charges ranging from misdemeanor assault to felony property damage, and there's even talk of an aggravated battery. Enhancement being considered after footage showed him allegedly striking Jim with what appeared to be a mic stand. Meanwhile, Jim Jones, released from the hospital but still bruised, battered, and looking like he went 12 rounds with a heavyweight, has already retained a high-powered attorney who specializes in celebrity lawsuits, because of course he has. Sources close to the case say Jim's team is preparing to sue Cam personally, the event organizers for lack of security, and even the venue for emotional distress. That's right, he's suing the building. And while Cam's camp is pushing the self-defense narrative hard, claiming he felt threatened and acted instinctively to neutralize a hostile force, Jim's side is spinning it as a premeditated attack driven by jealousy, money, and a thirst for complete control of the Dipset legacy. The internet, predictably, has turned into a digital courtroom, with fans turning into lawyers, judges, and executioners. Every old interview, tweet, freestyle, and blurry backstage clip is being treated like Exhibit A. One viral clip shows Cam in a 2016 radio interview, laughing when asked about the possibility of Dipset ever falling apart, saying, "That'll never happen. We too real for that?" Oh, the irony. Squite alone has already been edited into over 100 TikToks, each with dramatic music, slow motion, and captions like famous last words. And while the memes are hilarious, the damage is not. Multiple endorsements are reportedly on pause, and at least one brand has already issued a public statement distancing themselves from all individuals involved in recent events. Translation: we don't want your drama messing with our quarterly earnings. Insiders claim Cam's clothing line has already taken a hit in online sales since the incident, and one of Jim's upcoming brand deals was abruptly yanked off shelves before the ad campaign even dropped. It's not just reputation damage, that's real financial pain. But perhaps the most shocking twist came just days after the incident, when an anonymous source leaked internal Dipset documents showing that Jim Jones had quietly filed paperwork earlier this year to trademark a solo brand variation without Camron's name attached. The documents, dated and stamped, list a number of assets, including music rights, merch, and even potential NFT drops. The revelation sent fans into a frenzy. Was this what triggered the brawl? Did Cam find out that Jim was planning to take Dipset, solo, rebrand it, and lock Cam out of the money? It's impossible to say for sure, but the timing is suspicious. And if true, it flips the entire narrative suddenly. The man being wheeled out of the venue might not be the victim he's painting himself to be. Meanwhile, the legal circus continues. Court dates are being scheduled. Depositions are looming. And rumor has it that one of the security guards who broke up the fight has already been approached by multiple media outlets offering cash for an exclusive tell-all. Another twist. Surveillance footage from the venue may have already been leaked to underground gossip blogs who are currently being threatened with cease and desist orders. But you know how that goes. The internet never forgets. If even a second of that footage gets out publicly, it could change everything. Some sources claim that it clearly shows Jim throwing the first object, while others say Cam was aggressive from the moment he stepped backstage. Either way, the truth has become a matter of angles and edits. And nobody's buying the carefully written PR statements anymore. Fans are exhausted. One day they're defending Cam as the misunderstood genius who built the Dipset empire from scratch. The next day they're calling Jim the real heart of the group, betrayed and pushed out by ego and arrogance. Social media has turned into a war zone, with Dipset fans cannibalizing each other like a digital civil war. Reddit threads are flooded with deep dives. Twitter timelines are stacked with clapbacks and think pieces. TikTokers are reenacting the fight in skits like it's Shakespeare. It's entertainment. Yes, but at its core, it's also heartbreak. Because behind the lawsuits and leaks, this was supposed to be a brotherhood. Two men who built something iconic together are now enemies in a very public, very ugly war. And there are whispers that other artists in the crew might be next to fall. Word is, Joel Santana has gone radio silent, possibly trying to avoid getting dragged into the mess. Rumors suggest he was in the building that night, but slipped out just before the brawl erupted. Others say Freaky Zeke was seen trying to mediate between the two, only to get shoved aside when tempers flared. If more voices start coming forward with receipts, this could evolve from a two-man feud into a full-blown Dipset implosion. While all this chaos unfolds, the big question remains, can either of them recover from this? Camron is a legend, no doubt. His name holds weight in Harlem and across hip-hop. But legends can fall. And Jim? Despite always being seen as the soldier of the crew, the street-certified muscle might have reached his limit. Some fans are calling this the end of the road. Others are clinging to hope, praying that somehow, someway, this entire situation gets flipped into a redemption arc. But let's be honest, this isn't the early 2000s anymore. The game has changed. Fans expect transparency. Brands expect perfection. And the court of public opinion is ruthless. If Cam and Jim want to survive this, it's going to take more than damage control. It'll take a miracle. Whether they go their separate ways or try to fix what's broken, the legacy of Dipset has already been scarred forever. This moment, this fight, this scandal live in hip-hop history, right next to the most iconic breakups and beefs. And the worst part? It could have all been avoided if just one conversation had gone differently. But now we're here. With Cam facing charges, Jim nursing injuries, and both their careers hanging in the balance. So what happens next? A court trial? A documentary? A sit-down interview with tears and apologies? Or maybe just more silence, more secrets, and more damage as the story spins out of control? One thing's for certain, nothing will ever be the tape. Same again. So now the question we're all left with is simple: what happens when hip-hop royalty turns on itself? When the kings of Harlem trade verses for violence, brotherhood for betrayal, and a legacy for a lawsuit? Is this just a bump in the road or the final chapter in a saga that should have ended with a mic drop, not a mugshot? Are Camron and Jim Jones really done forever, or is this just the beginning of the ugliest reunion no one asked for? One thing's for sure, Dipset will never be the same again. And neither will the way we look at the legends we once idolized. But what do? You think? Was Cam just defending his legacy? Was Jim finally standing up for the respect he never got? Or are they both just victims of their own unchecked egos and expired relevance? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one, even the wild ones. And if you think this scandal is already off the rails, just wait, because no, the story isn't over. More leaks, more receipts, and probably more chaos are right around the corner. So if you want to be the first to know when the next bombshell drops, make sure to like, share, and subscribe right now. Tap that notification bell so you don't miss a single twist in the downfall of Dipset. 'Cause around here, we don't. Just report the news, we expose the drama, dig up the dirt, and serve it all with a side of side-eye. This is the channel that keeps it messy, keeps it real, and never looks away when legends fall. Trust us, you are going to want front row seats for what comes next. Stay locked in. The story's just getting started.